Everybody's focused? All right, cool. So we're going to talk about a couple of things tonight. When I met with Kevin, before the holidays, we good? No feedback? All right, cool. We talked about different topics that we could have out here at Keystone, and one of the things that we talk a lot about, when we're dealing with startups and smaller companies, is that first product. But what we don't talk about a lot is what to do next, what to do afterwards. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So my name is Dave. I've been doing product development, innovation for about 30 years, off and on, different kind of roles, different sorts of opportunities. Do have a confession to make, though, before we get started. I did not go to B school. I don't have an MBA. I went to art school for the sole purpose of avoiding math. All right, so keep that in mind when we're talking tonight. But that does mean that I've spent a lot of time designing products, working with companies on how to pull thoughts together into cohesive product lines in a lot of different arenas. I'm well seasoned, which means I'm old. So I've done a lot of different things, and I've done software, hardware, firmware. And so we'll be talking about a few of those things tonight. But the thing that we're going to talk about most is really evolving from kind of an early stage startup to growth. And at that point in the journey is sort of fraught with some tension and things that we need to think about. We're creating a roadmap. And I'm going to give you 3 strategies to think about it. So tonight's conversation should really be a conversation. It shouldn't just be giving information out. So feel free to stop at any point, ask questions, call me out on something if you think it doesn't sound right. Let's make this a dialogue. Otherwise, it's just going to be me talking to you for a little bit. So, but first, before we get started on a healthy, sustainable roadmap, who here has heard of the Juicero? Anyone? Does this look familiar to anybody? All right, cool. This is a great story. So this is a mid-2000s product that came out, and it is this really beautiful thing that sits on your countertop, and it gives you cold-pressed juice, right? And it squeezes the juice out of the package. They show up at your house. It's super healthy. It's ready to go. And it had all the stuff, right? It was mid-2000s, so you needed to have a Silicon Valley founder that had that. They raised $120 million in capital to bring this thing to life. They had a rock star designer. It looked gorgeous, right? So this is a status symbol. It was subscription-based. Remember when subscription-based started becoming a thing almost immediately? So I've got juice coming to my house. It's a recurring revenue model. It's also an IoT device. My juicer is connected to the internet. Don't really know why I need that, but it is. And it costs $400, and most of all, it's got a health value around it. So it's a healthy lifestyle thing. So I had all the stuff. So how come less than a year later, it's a B school study in failure? Why? How would that happen so quickly? It's kind of an interesting story. It all collapsed on April 1st, 2017. What the guys at Juicero didn't understand was some of the lessons that the folks at IDEO have taught us. IDEO is a famous innovation company out of California, design thinking sort of company, consultancy. But they came up with these 3 things: feasibility, viability, and desirability. All is a way to measure the success of your product. So when you think about feasibility is sort of like, can I do it? Is it possible? It's the science and engineering part of what you're trying to pull off. Viability is the business side. It's, can I make money at it? Can I sell it for a price that people are going to want to pay me? I can make money, stay in business, hire people, et cetera. And then finally is desirability. And that's kind of the most important. That's, does a customer want it? Is this something that consumers are going to be interested in? And what the guys at Juicero didn't understand was, that's pretty blown out, but that's all right. We'll go with it. They had the feasibility, right? You could put a juice bag inside this thing and it would squeeze the crap out of it and you'd get great juice out of it. That was totally feasible, doable. They spent millions of dollars doing the engineering side of it. The viability side, absolutely, right? It's a $400 juicer. There's plenty of margin in there for me to make that as a business. I've got the supply chain set up. I have people supplying raw materials. I can ship the stuff to your house. All of that stuff works on a viability standpoint. But they missed the most important part, the desirability, the consumer, the customer. right? So what they failed to realize was consumers are really smart. And pretty soon people figured out if I grab those juice bags and I squeeze them over a glass with my bare hands, guess what happens? The juice comes out. Right, exactly. I didn't have to pay $400 to do it. I didn't need a subscription. I didn't need it to be connected to the internet. And I didn't need it to be farm to glass. So they just lost that. And that's the underpinning that holds all those things together, that desirability aspect of it. So when they were thinking of their roadmap, they didn't consider the consumer's probably a little bit smarter than they thought. And that holds all those things together, that thing in the middle, that's your promise. You as a founder, you as a business developer, that's your promise to the consumer to provide value. So we think about that as your North Star, right? Your North Star is your mission. So when you get up in the morning, I was talking to this gentleman over here earlier, he's got an educational product that he wants to bring. When he gets up in the morning and thinks about that educational software product or platform, what's the mission? What's the value? What's the one thing that gets you out of bed that makes you want to go do this? That's your North Star. It's not a mission statement. We've all written those, right? And it ends up on your annual report, and it's something about providing continuous shareholder value through iterative things to bring products to market in a timely. It's that kind of garbage, right? This is the thing that if somebody held you up at gunpoint, said, first of all, they'd say, give me all your money. Give them all your money. And then they'd say, what does your company do? Which is a weird question to be asked at gunpoint. But if they said that, you would say something along the lines of, well, I'm here to provide shareholder value. No, you wouldn't say that. You would say, I'm here to get produce from farms to restaurants faster than anyone. There it is. That's your mission. That's your vision. And if you can't say it in one sentence, you should think about it again. Because that one sentence, that vision, that's the key to your roadmap. That's the key to all the things that you're going to build. From the time you start till the time you sell your company for $1 million or more, that's where you're going to be. So, skipped ahead. Anyway, so we're going to talk about a couple examples of what that looks like. You guys can't leave. It's just getting good. All right, so a couple examples of North Star. So everybody knows what this is. This is the iPhone 1, right? So imagine, Steve Jobs, we always talk about that he was the guy that would say no to 100 things so he could say yes to the one great thing, right? That was his mantra, is being clear and focused, knowing what your North Star is. He also, people used to say he was an out-of-the-box thinker, which is really not true. That's one of my that's a pet peeve of mine, that phrase. Really what he did was he moved the box, right? So if you imagine in 2007 and you're Nokia, and old enough to have had one of the first cell phones, you're running around thinking you're great because you're making the smallest phone possible. It's like this big. It's like in Zoolander, he opens it. I used to go through airports and I'd see people pushing the keys with a pencil because they were so small. And you're like, we got this thing made, right? Meanwhile, Apple in California says, hold my beer. And they started developing a new kind of product. And I can take pictures, it can take videos, I can share text, I can type on a real keyboard. It's got a beautiful touch screen. Oh yeah, by the way, it also makes phone calls, right? So how would you get there? Because that's your North Star. Create simple, portable access to a user's digital ecosystem. The word phone is not in there because the how is not in there. It's really about the vision and what you want to be. So while everybody else was making phones, Steve Jobs and Apple made a portal to your digital and emotional world that fits in your pocket. That's a completely different way to think about it. And now everything in the world that's mobile looks like that device. So here's another one. So there's a collective groan. I get it. We're going to talk about pre-red pill Elon and talk about just Tesla as a company. So this is another example. Say what you will about him politically, but he's got the gift of being able to cast vision. So with Tesla, they're a struggling EV company, and Elon comes along and recasts a vision, and they go to market differently. He's pretty famous for saying we're not a car company, right? And I think that's pretty important. They're about sustainable personal transportation, and they did it differently from every other company in the world, and they were rewarded with a market cap that's crazy. Their market cap this year is $1.3 trillion with a T. That's more than the top 20 automakers combined worldwide. So why is that? It's because that's their North Star, to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. The word car is not in there. So they're charting a different course, and it's a vision that they can build on, right? So anybody here have a Tesla? The guy one? Yeah, me neither. But I've been around the brand. It's pretty amazing. They completely changed the way people do this. You don't have to go to a dealership. If you need service, you can call and download that update. If you want new performance or more features, you can download that too. It's pretty amazing. They've completely changed the dynamic by which people interact with cars. I've got an F-150. If I go to the dealership and say, hey, can I download some more horsepower? They're going to say, no, you're going to need to buy a new car, right? So while Ford and Honda and everybody else are turning sheet metal into cars, Tesla's creating a new sustainable environment with a product roadmap that includes batteries, it includes in-home solar panels, an entire ecosystem of products and roadmap that have nothing to do with cars, but builds on that vision, okay? So where are you guys? So if you're like a lot of smaller companies, you're just getting started, there you go. You're here, right? You've got your MVP. You've launched this product. You've probably got a few customers. You may have some money, some investment. And now you got to start thinking about growth. And all the ideas come bubbling to the top. What do I do next? You've got a list of features and benefits and products that you want to build. Everybody wants to go up and to the right. But this is kind of the part of the business that gets a little scary, right? Because now I got to invest. Now I got to put real money on the table. I've got to hire real people. I've got to chart a course. And that's why they call it the valley of death, right? Because to take a step requires money. I've got to run fast enough across that valley that I get to the revenue side before I run out of money. So you have to place bets. We're all gamblers, or we wouldn't be in this business as innovators. But knowing how to chart that course takes a little bit of thinking. So this is pretty broadly applicable. It could be software. It can be services, businesses. It could be restaurants. It doesn't really matter. These principles sort of apply pretty broadly. So we're going to talk about really three things and three principles. So again, as we go through this, this is meant to be interactive. If you guys have questions about it or want to dig in, let me know. But the first thing to think about is early stage growth. I've got my MVP. What do I do next? The temptation right now is to go chase the shiny thing. Because somebody, brought you a great idea and you're going to go work on that. But the key is building from the core. Who here loves planks? You don't love planks. Nobody loves planks. Come on. But yeah, true, right? So we do that. We go to the gym. We do planks. We do sit-ups. The reason why we do that is because we want to play golf or pickleball or do CrossFit. And all those things require core strength. The same in the business. We've got to build the core of the business in order to be able to go out and grow. Because you can't expand and grow and add people and add scale if the core of your business isn't solid. But we tend to ignore that right out of the gate. All right, so we build sort of weird, unrelated features that take resources. Those weaken the core, and eventually we can't grow to meet that. So looking at a couple of companies that did it the right way. Slack users out there? Yeah, I use Slack pretty religiously now. I hated it to begin with because it always felt to me like I was at a party and I left the room and I came back and everybody was still talking. I was like, what the heck's going on? Because that was kind of early Slack functionality. It was just kind of this big roving conversation. So it got better quickly because they also followed their vision, right? Seamless team communication with minimal friction. Again, they're not saying how, because how is going to change with scale. But what they are saying is it's got to be seamless, it's got to be about teams, and the communication has to be instant. So when they start looking at those initial core sort of products, they start thinking about how do we just improve that user experience? What are the first things that we can do? Call it low-hanging fruit, whatever, but what are the first things that we can do to make that seamless communication better and faster? Seems silly, but emojis. I can now pop an emoji in there without typing a response and get across what I need to do quickly and efficiently. I can also have other tools involved. Dropbox is a great thing. I mean, Slack is a great file transfer tool. It wasn't intended to be that way, but it works pretty well that way. And then finally, being able to search. So now I can go and I can search those conversations and figure out where I'm at, find those files. All those things are just, they're not doorbuster features. They're not wildly new, but they make the user experience really, really solid. So when you start to do things later on, you expand and you want to add enterprise features, capabilities to do bigger things, add security, the core is solid and you can do that. Zoom's another example of that. Everybody uses Zoom. Obviously did really well during COVID. Their North Star is make video communications frictionless. And they did it pretty well. We all spent a lot of time in 21, 22 on Zoom. And some of the early core features that they developed were things like virtual backgrounds. I'm working at home, kids are everywhere, the house is a complete shit show, but I can pop in the virtual background, things look good, things look ironed and pressed and figured out. That's just a simple user experience thing that makes the core of that product much more robust and strong. Being able to add breakout rooms, being able to do meetings in multiple ways that work for me, those are all core features that, again, build that core. Now it allows me to have an expanded offering around enterprise and security. And me as a business, if I'm Zoom, now I can approach any company in the world and offer integrations that work with the cybersecurity that the guys just up here were talking about, right? But they couldn't do that without those core features. So a couple of things to think about when you're doing core stuff. Do the boring essential things that you know you need to do. This is like buying an air conditioner in the wintertime. Nobody ever said, hey guys, come over, let's have a beer and look at my air conditioner. But in July, when it's 110 degrees for a week, you're gonna be really glad you bought the air conditioner. This is that kind of thing. So those first features should be the stuff that you already know about. It's the pebble in your shoe kind of things. Logging into my product takes 3 steps. Can it take 1? Can I add a form link so all the information pushes forward and my users don't have to enter things multiple times? Can I put spare parts in the package so I don't get customer service calls later? Is there a CRM tool that I can integrate like Salesforce to start collecting customer data that I know I'm going to need when I scale? So they're not exciting, but they're important. Beware of feature creep. This is huge, right? So every time you take money, if you take VC money or if you bring other people into your company, those people come with opinions that they paid the right to have. And with those opinions come ideas, and those ideas might be great, but they also might be not now ideas. And by that I mean, if I don't take those features and bump them up against some metrics to make sure they're a good idea, they can again absorb all of my resources chasing this one thing. So does it benefit the customer? Does it have impact? Does it serve that vision that we talk about? That's the way to kill feature creep. So anyway, that's a great place to have the parking lot in your business and put all those ideas that are great ideas, but not now ideas for later. All right? So, and then finally is on that guy is don't over-engineer. There's another time suck that I see a lot of people invest in. The belt and suspenders approach to software development or product development. Do what you need to do to get the job done, make sure it's stable, and then leave it alone. It's going to change later, right? So those are all core things. So you've done the hard work, you got core strength, you're building up your product, and it's time to think really about new features, really new stuff. It's time to step out a little bit. Where do those new ideas come from? I think the most important thing you should be doing is listen to your customers, because they're going to lead you down a path and help you build that product out. So pay attention. They'll give you the permission to expand your product. It's easy in the early stages to change focus, think about different things. But if you engage with your consumer, listen to their feedback, they're going to bring you some things that you never thought were possible for your business. So, good example of this is Airbnb. They launched Experiences. Experiences was a great overlay product for them because it builds on existing things. It's a product line they already had. It's an infrastructure they had. It's hosts they had. And they realized there was an adjacency there with their customers who wanted more. They want to go hang out with alpacas in Australia. They want to go learn how to cook in Thailand. You can do all those things, right? Utilizing their existing infrastructure, their core features They can offer their host more revenue, and they can bring in more customers into the fold. It's immediate value for both. And the customer gave them permission to do that. Wasn't where they started out, but it was an easy adjacency that made sense to grow. Solo Stove's another great example of this too, right? Two brothers that really understood manufacturing and import. So they built world's best fire pit, right? And they realized through the research and the engineering process and the customer service things they were doing, you know what? People do a lot of other things in their backyards besides fire pits. Maybe they'd like to entertain or cook. So as they've started to define their range and what their next step was, their adjacencies were $500 pizza ovens, things like that, because it's the same core set of skills, importing, manufacturing, engineering, delivery, that they already had, but they were able to expand their reach, and their consumers led them to that, to a whole lifestyle brand that they currently have. So have an active conversation with your users. Don't wait for them to call the customer service line. Reach out, engage with them in a way that they can provide feedback. Be okay with that feedback. Sometimes they're going to tell you your product's not good, and that's okay. That's what you want to hear early. I'd rather hear that early at this stage than after I've invested a ton of capital in building something out, right? So listen to your customer. Adapt like a virus. TikTok during COVID, they made a huge shift immediately. As soon as they started seeing that people were staying home because it was a social platform, we're going to invest in content that's around DIY stuff, at-home fitness, influencers that work from their home. So we're going to shift and adapt very, very quickly, all right? Because that speed makes a difference when you're trying to expand your roadmap. Part of this is about looking for gaps, which is what things are my customers doing that I'm not currently. There's a company here in town called My Dumpster Guy, because I've seen these dumpsters around town. They're black and they have a big yellow chevron on the front. That's a gentleman whose name is Sean Poloniak, and he was a entrepreneur and advertising guy, marketing guy here in town. And he saw the gap that you can't order a haul-off dumpster for your project online. You had to call 3 people, wait for a call back, schedule it, whatever. So he created a platform and allowed you to do that from your website, click, the dumpster shows up the next day. It's simple. It's a gap that you're filling. So what are those gaps that your consumers currently have? All right? So, and then finally, when you're looking at these things, keep in mind when you see your customers doing something, that's a fact. You saw it happen. It's a fact. That doesn't make it an insight. So what do I mean by that? If 90% of your customers are buying X on your website, logic tells you that let's make more of X. Let's do more of that, which is right. That's smart. But if you look at it a little deeper, why are they making that choice? Are there less choices for them to see? It could be that something as simple as, hey, baby, page doesn't scroll up high enough, so I can't see what the other options are. So see it, understand it as a fact, but then dig in and see if it's an insight for you to then roadmap against. Some of those things can be a little bit deceiving. All right. The last guy here. So the third step is now we've got the core, we've built out some new features. Now we've got to ensure long-term stability as a company. And this allows us to hire people, to grow, to eventually commercialize our business, monetize it in some way, potentially sell it off, could be. But you've got to balance, what are all those short-term things I do today that match up with my long-term vision? It's the whole, journey of a million mile steps. It starts with one step. Another failure example here. Has everybody heard of Quibi before? Probably not, because it was around for about 5 minutes. But Quibi was a bite-sized video content company. Their whole shtick was, I'm going to put bite-sized content on your phone. It's optimized for mobile. We're going to have this great library of generated original content. We're going to pay for all the licenses up front. We're going to invest a bunch of our investor money in creating a piece of software that allows video to be in a vertical format instead of landscape so I can look at it while I'm walking. Right? All those things sounded really cool until Netflix showed up and until YouTube started serving up original content. So while they were focused in one direction, laying the groundwork for their business, they failed to look around the corner and see what was coming. So long term, their business viability dried up, and a lot of people were out a lot of money in a hurry because they didn't think about what steps can I do now that are going to build for long-term success. So Spotify is a great example of somebody who did it the right way. Right? Spotify, create a world where music can be easily accessible to everyone while ensuring compensation for artists. Right? So we're going to create music. We're going to deliver it to you in a way that nobody else has before. So everybody knows the interface looks like. It's a great user experience. They were competing with free music at the beginning, right? They were competing with basically pirated music early in their career. So they had to short-term challenges around growing their user base. So they had a freemium product. So I'll get them in the door first. We'll convert them later. We will build a superior UX so people understand that and people will get sucked into it and use it as their ecosystem. And then we'll go global in small markets and build those as we go. So little steps along the way that build a moat to allow them to be agile. Things like Wrapped and Spotify AI that bring all those features to you in a meaningful way. So partnerships with Amazon, Facebook, they were one of the first people into podcasts and they got Rogan, right? So again, they're building this moat because they already have the infrastructure. They can deliver this content in a way that nobody else can. And now they're making themselves sort of invincible at scale. All right? So they also measured what matters. I think when you think about your business long term, what do you pay attention to? Is it just top line revenue? Or in their case, is it how do I convert people from free to paid? How do I look at, they say ARPU, average revenue per user. So not how many new people, but how much revenue can I generate off an existing customer? Those are all things that you have to think about long term because then you can see the benchmarks as you grow your business. So everybody knows what the results are. 550 million users, number one sharing platform in the world. They've changed the pay model to be 80% streaming for all music. So all of these things based on kind of early planning. So just a couple of pointers around that. Create value-driven milestones. This is going to be different for all you guys, depending on what your business is. What should you measure? What's meaningful to you? Sometimes that's going to be revenue, usually not. Maybe it's market share. Who are you taking from? It could be things like churn. Who's leaving and why? But measuring those early so that as you grow, you can start to figure out, if you're making a meaningful difference in your business. Those are all important. Pay attention to fit. Little companies don't make good big companies because their products and their customers shift over time. So as you start, your customers, you might be able to afford to do business. If you're selling coffee, I can afford to do business at scale with 10 people in this market. But as I grow and I hire more people and my business model shifts, that product market fit, I can't afford to do business unless you buy 50 pounds of coffee from me a month. So that's going to change. And when it changes, you've got to be ready to shift and chase that new product. So pay attention to fit as you get bigger and scale. Build the moat. This is sort of an important thing. You guys should always wonder, what's your superpower? What makes me better at this than anybody else? What makes my company more valuable in this space than another one? And sometimes it might be your ability to source product. Sometimes it might be your access to talent. It could be your partnership with other people in the field and other companies. It could be access. Think about those as defendable things and start to line those up as your arsenal so you can defend your business as you go forward. So last thing is stay agile and scrappy. Even as we get big, I think it's really important to think about yourself in those small terms. We have the tendency to want to build big teams. Big teams mean success in some ways. I've always sort of kept in mind hire generalists and rent specialists. So if you need a data scientist for a project, go rent a data scientist. Doesn't mean you need to hire one. You need to go find one that can do the work for you. So just be smart about that. Stay agile as you move forward. So anyway, these are kind of the three tenets we just talked about. Build from the core. Make sure you're making smart moves early. Do the boring stuff. Stay customer-centric. They're going to lead you to your next big opportunity. Balance those short and long-term goals. Make sure you keep that and keep your eye on the long game when you're making those decisions. Because if you can't say these decisions serve that vision, that North Star, then you really should question that. And that's going to help you form that roadmap. So when you're making decisions, so everybody's got a million great ideas. That's what Keystone is about. But how do you sort those ideas and put them in a way that is going to allow you to actually execute them? So, but Dave, where's the framework? How do I do this myself? Glad you asked. So, there's a worksheet I can make available to you guys later if you want, but it forces you to answer a couple of simple questions. First, that whole North Star thing that we talked about at the beginning, sitting down and really understanding what your purpose is. We could do an entire session on just that, and it's a really cool process to go through. But it's pretty liberating when you get done because it allows you to say no to so many things. So once you understand that, look at those 3 stages: early growth, expansion, and then sustainable future. And what I want you to do is for each one of those, I want you to pose a question. So, early growth. What's the one thing I could do today that costs no money that's going to improve my user experience? It's the one thing. It's probably free. It's probably laying around on the floor. You just pick it up, implement it, and your product is better. That's your answer. Then there's a feature. And then we go back to desirability, viability, and feasibility. Does it check those boxes? Is it something the customer wants? Can I do it? And can I sustain it? And is it feasible? If you can say yes to those things, then it's probably a really good idea. And then you work your way down the list to expansion. What are the next thing that my consumer wants that I don't have now? What activities are they engaging in that they could engage with me? And then you start to answer those questions. So this is really no more than a filter to think about your ideas for roadmap and get them into a place where you can actually go and execute those. So, thank you. Appreciate that. Questions?
Dave, I got a question.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's probably getting lost in the sauce. And what I mean by that is, as founders, I think we're really close to the problem. And we tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to see everything and solve all the problems. And I think if you just take a step back and you look at what you've accomplished and you understand, again, that clarity of vision, it then helps you refocus on where you want to go. So I think it's both the challenge and also the solution is reframing, reframing that question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so really what I meant by that, and coffee is an example, but it could be pretty much anything. If you launch your MVP, you're optimized, you're really, really clear on what your audience is and what the value is you provide. As you scale, the value may not change, but the audience might change. And that could be an opportunity. Scale allows me to say, okay, I used to deal with one-off coffee, companies, and now I can deal with chains. I can go after Dunkin' Donuts now, as scale. So that's the fit that I'm talking about. It also can be being aware that it costs more money to do business with smaller entities at scale. So if it's just me running around, I can make all the deliveries and it's no big deal. But as soon as I have 5 drivers, now I'm paying them to deliver 1 bag of coffee to this guy, my business has shifted. So it's both opportunities and potentially pitfalls, but there's usually opportunity behind it. Sure. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I think the number one question in kind of, and again, what I know about events is by this much, but in terms of value proposition, I'm invited to and we're invited to all sorts of events, paid and otherwise. And I think what I always look at is the value that I'm getting out of it. And if there's going to be meaningful content there that can change my world, I'm going to invest in that. And that value could just be straight up entertainment. right? I mean, there's a whole industry built on that. So I think what I would do is I would prototype it. I'm a product designer by background, and that's the first thing. If I have an idea and I think, oh, well, I think I have something here that might work, let's put together a quick prototype for that. And that could be you putting together the flyer and the value proposition, understanding it really well, and then getting a panel of 8 people together that are sort of in your consumer group and talking to them about it. Because they're going to tell you really quickly, and I think you'll know. No doesn't mean no. No might mean too much, or maybe you have to layer things on. Maybe. Exactly, but it could also mean that maybe it's not one event. Maybe they'd be willing to sign up for a series of things, and they build up points towards something else at the end. So it could be that maybe just the one event isn't the product. Maybe it's a series of things that results in something else. Oh, okay, now I'm interested in that. So, just make sure, again, it's reframing how you define what the product is. Maybe it's not an event. Maybe it's a group of things. Cool. Great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the questions. It was really fun to talk to you guys tonight.